I am divine. I am perfect. I am free. My life is opening up to me in the divine, perfect understanding of grace, and I am seeing everything that I want to see in my reality. Does that manifest for you? Does that come to you? Is everything coming to you that you want, that you need? Do you see these words, I am divine, I am perfect, I am free, in your reality? Do you see that experience of I am divine, I am perfect, I am free, in your world, opening up to you, feeling you, receiving you, knowing you? That's here now. That's this moment. That's experiencing grace. That's experiencing truth. Mati kurusha kurmate. Gire shiva karana rete kaliyata tanda rete shava kuru tondoro koroma sivaya karana. We are here. We are now. We are experiencing grace. We are truth. We are divinity. We are love. We don't need to be anything other than love. We don't. We don't need to be mean with each other. We don't need to be harsh with each other. We don't need to tell each other our faults and our difficulties. We don't. All we need is love. It's all we need. Loving, kind, generous, compassionate, truthful. From the honest truth within our heart space, right? Not demeaning truthful, not hurtful truthful. Truthful from God's grace, from God's love, from God's divinity. What's the truth in God's love? We're all divine and we're all free and we're all perfect and we're all amazing. That's the truth. That's the truth from God's space of love and light and joy and peace. We don't need to be harsh with each other. We don't need to be unkind. We don't need to be demeaning. What the world needs now is love. That's what the world needs. Kindness, compassion, fruitful manifestation, so that we can all be living the joyous life that we came here to be living. Kindness, love, compassion, kindness, love, compassion. What does that feel like to you? Kindness, love, compassion. Nishita karana arete shava. If we're kind with each other, if we're loving with each other, if we're truthful, by being divine, perfect, and free, the truth of divinity. God doesn't point out our faults, quote unquote. God says, I love you, you're perfect. Everything is divine, everything is free. See yourself as divine, see yourself as perfect, see yourself as amazing, see yourself as free. Matakarana siva korono horoto. Improvements can be made, obviously, in life. Improvements can always be made. We can always see ourselves as more divine, see ourselves as more pure, see ourselves as more loving, see ourselves as more free. But what if we just called each other out on love, called each other out on joy, called each other out on divinity? I see your divinity. I see your truth. I see your love. I see it. I see it within you. I see how perfect you are. I see how amazing you are. I see how beautiful you are. I see how blessed you are. That's the truth. That's the truth. We're all beautiful. We're all divine. We're all perfect and we're all free. It doesn't mean you don't stand up for yourself if someone is calling you on something that doesn't feel good, right? Or going against your wishes in some way that violates your rights as a human being. But we're always in this space of divine love and divine truth within our being. So to see one as divine, perfect, loving, and free is to see with the eyes of God's love and God's grace. So for me, I've had a lot of experiences of people coming into my life to mess with my ego, so to speak. And I know that's a valid concern for many. The ego has to be seen and dissolved and away so we can see our highest truth and our highest divinity. But at what point does that become deceptive grace? At what point does that become something that is satisfying the ego of the person who is giving out the ego dissolution? When we see each other as free, when we see each other as divine, when everything that comes out of our mouth is kindness and love, it's seen as grace, always truth, always divinity. So there was a fine line for me when people would quote unquote work with my ego, because I would end up crying, I would end up feeling a bit tortured, like unfairness was dished out, or whatever. But I always sat and I said, this is good for me. This is ego work. This is good for me. I appreciate the ego work. I appreciate that they're trying to tear down this part of me that's keeping me from my own divinity. So I would seek it out. I would seek out people who wanted to do this kind of dark ego work with me and bring me to my knees, so to speak. Feeling like really that I was worthless and I had nothing. It's really where it brought me many times. But I knew that there was a part of me that had to be dissolved in order for me to see my divinity, so I would stay with it. But there's always a fine line between that and someone trying to hurt you, someone trying to satisfy their own egoic needs, someone trying to do what they need to do to make themselves feel superior or powerful. I don't see the need to call people out in that way. I see the need to form a bond of loving friendship and grace. I see the need to allow each other to experience our truth with each other in divine understanding and love. That being said, there are people that work closely with me, and I definitely call out the things that they are wanting to release, and they don't always appreciate it in the moment. Rarely do they appreciate it in the moment. But not once have they not come back and said, thank you, I needed to see that. It's very hard to see when you point it out to me. It's very hard to look at. But thank you, I needed to see that. I actually don't enjoy this kind of pointing out with people because it arouses usually a sense of anger that gets placed onto me because I'm the one that's saying, hey, there's this thing, you want to see it, right? You want to look at it, right? Here it is. So usually it comes to the point of anger from that person because it's hard. It's hard to look at our ego stuff. It's really hard. We say we want to do it, and then in the moment, it's hard. It's just hard. But what is the distinction between a loving friendship, a loving relationship where you're lovingly edging the person towards a greater version of themselves because they've asked you to do that? You're not just giving it without an invitation. They've asked you to point things out, so you're giving it to them in that way. And it's loving. But what's the difference between that and someone who just decides to start poking you where they know it hurts? Poking you in more of a deceptive kind of a way to show their superiority over you. Because if they say, wow, you still react, you still are having reactions, you're not as good as you think you are. What is that? What is someone trying to prove, or what is someone trying to do from that stance, from that place? Or to take you down to such a degree that you can't question yourself, you can't question them, you can't question the circumstance. You're just kind of stuck in this place of deception. How do we tell the difference between that and love and loving grace, where people are truly trying to point out to you something that you would like to work on, to raise your energy, to raise your vibration? Something that you truly would like to see, to come into a higher space of divinity. Because it never feels good. Even if someone's doing it lovingly, it never feels good because that's the thing that you need to work on. So it's coming up in that moment. So the question is, as you reflect on it, as you reflect on that moment and what was pointed out to you in that moment, and what was hopefully seen, maybe dissolved, does it feel good as you look back upon it? Does it feel good? Does it feel like, oh, that was there, and that reared its ugly head because it was being pointed out. A light was being shined on it. And it gave me a moment to reflect upon it and to see it. And now as I look back on it, I can say, thank you. Thank you for showing me that. Thank you for bringing your love into the situation, because it's never easy to bring up someone else's stuff, so to speak. But if we look back upon it, and time has passed, and we truly look at it from our perspective of grace in this now moment, when the person was speaking, or doing or acting, was it based in love? Was it intended to give you love? Was it given in grace? Did it have a powerful effect on you to bring you into a higher state? Or were you left alone, confused, egoically driven to know more about yourself because this has crushed you? So egoically driven to know more about yourself as opposed to sincerely driven to know more about yourself. So there is loving kindness. Loving kindness is the truth. Loving kindness is the divine way to be. There's loving kindness. We don't need to be mean. It's not necessary. I had a teacher that was mean. He was also very loving, but he was mean. Calling out things in ways that demeaned me. In the end, as I look back years later, I don't see that it raised me up to a higher state of consciousness. I see that me stepping out of the situation and saying that wasn't right, that didn't feel good. Something could have been pointed out in a much different, much more loving way. I don't see the need for that kind of demeaning. And unfortunately, that happens in a lot of group settings where there's a teacher who's doing that kind of work with people. And if we see that the people are rising up to their highest vibration of love, light, truth, and divinity, we see that it's being done consciously in love. And that the people are really receiving the love that's being given. But if it's done from a lower state, it's more about control, that's more about power, that's more about trying to understand what true divinity is. Not knowing, but trying to understand. We see people being confused, crushed. The ego only becomes stronger because now they're questioning everything about themselves and their lives in an egoic way, not in a conscious way. They're not being given the love that they need to fully understand their true divinity. If you're being demeaned, if you're being crushed, if you don't feel that it's right in your heart of hearts, I don't care who's saying it. I don't care if they've been deemed the next Christ consciousness. I don't care who's saying it. If you're feeling crushed, if you're feeling demeaned, if you're feeling like it's not loving and it's not kind, if you're feeling like it's pushing you more into an egoic state of needing to understand because you are not being given the true perception of grace, I encourage you to take yourself out of that situation. I learned the hard way. I learned after years of subjecting myself to that, and I would find that personality over and over again. I needed to be told what I was doing wrong. I needed to be told the ways that I was misperceiving. I needed to be shown where my attitude could still act up. And I have since worked on all of these traits and these qualities within myself from a place of love. From a place of love. I'm directly working with Divinity, with God, who is clearing these qualities from me from a place of divine love. It's a much different feeling, and it's effective. It's effective. Masieta kurushava kurumate. Unda kaliana krashava kuruno sorto. Taraniki kalieta kurushava kurumam. God doesn't make you feel like you're this tall, less than, different than. God makes you feel loved. And the only reason God wants to point these things out to you is to help you evolve into your truest, divinest, most beautiful self. Ideally, that's why anyone would be doing this with you. But you can feel the energy behind what's being said. You can feel the energy of how it's being said. Me personally, I'm done with that kind of exchange. I'm done. I don't want it. If people come into my life with loving kindness, with truth, with divinity, with that space of oneness, great. Great. That's how we exchange. That's how we share ideas. That's how we trade energies. I don't think it's necessary. It's how I raise my children. I don't yell at them. I don't punish them. I don't even put them in timeouts. If things seem to be getting really extreme, I'll take an iPad away. That's what I've come up with. It's about love. It's about love. It's about love. If someone's extreme and they're going to hurt themselves or someone else, or they are hurting you, then yes, you need to stand up and be strong, obviously. You don't take abuse from others, and you don't allow others to give others abuse. They're going to hurt themselves if they're going to hurt someone else, if they're going to hurt you. Even if the verbal violence is so strong, obviously you put a stop to it. Right? We don't say, oh, I love you, when someone's hitting you or screaming at you or destroying something or going after someone. It wouldn't be very effective in that moment. Right? But we can allow love to act in that moment. It's very different. If in that moment, so here's what I do with my kids. I have a daughter who, she's phasing out of it, but she had a lot of, I guess what we would call tantrums, and she would get very, very angry. And she would want to hurt others, and she would want to destroy things. So I would just take her in a room and shut the door and sit in front of the door so she couldn't leave. And she would scream and she would become very angry. But rather than letting myself go into anger, I would close my eyes and I would say, God, I don't know what to do right now. I don't know how to help her. I don't know how to bring her down. I surrender this completely to you. Please show me. And I would surrender to the energy in that moment. And usually the light language would come through. And we would start speaking or singing. And usually she would stop eventually. She would just calm down and stop. Sometimes we have a session with her, so we just allow the energy to talk to her in those moments, even if she's not listening. Eventually, it goes and she stops. It's out of love. Because in those moments, I didn't want my anger to take over. That part of me couldn't resolve the issue. I wanted love to take over. So no matter how energetically disturbing it seems, we remove the person from harm, from harming anyone or anything. And we allow ourselves to fully dive into love in that moment, no matter how challenging it is. Then we know that what's coming through us is truly coming for the best of that being. Another thing I like to do is, in a moment of having a battle with someone, I like to stop, take myself out of the situation, put myself in the moment of leaving this body when I will be doing my life review and seeing the moment from that space. When I'm looking at it and saying, how did I do? How did I do in that moment? Did I choose anger or did I choose love? It's a great way to release yourself from the situation, because you know you will be seeing that moment again and you will be experiencing that moment again. And I personally want to take as many of those moments as I can and transform them into divine love. That's my goal. That's my purpose. My ex-husband may not agree that that's how I'm responding and that's how I'm acting, because that's probably the person who I have the most exchange with in that way. It's not extreme, but it's not easy. So I continuously just go inward. Sometimes I'm just talking to myself the whole time the energy is off. I'm just saying, God, please speak through me. Please act through me. Please take my ego out of this. God, please speak through me. Please act through me. Please take my ego out of this. So he'll think I'm mad because I'm being quiet, but what I'm really doing is going into that place and finding the love, finding the truth, finding the divinity. And you never know how God is going to act. God might yell through you because it's necessary in that moment. God might speak in sweet, quiet tones because it's necessary in that moment. But ultimately, if someone is acting in love, you'll know it. You might not know in that moment, but you'll know it. You'll know it. So I see so much mental confusion being accumulated from some of these gurus right now. And I don't see it serving the person. I don't see it serving the greater good, and I don't see it serving divine truth, ultimately. So just reflecting today on my own state. My own state says no more. I'm not receiving that kind of energy anymore. I'm not available for that kind of energy anymore. I have no need for that kind of energy anymore. I'm done with it. And if it were really necessary for someone to shout out at me in a moment of misunderstanding, because I'm purely acting from an egoic place, I would see that eventually. I would understand what was happening. Go into your own heart, go into your own truth, go into your own divinity, and go into your own love. If it doesn't feel good, what someone else is doing with you, take some time away. Spend some time with yourself and your own truth. And ask your inner divine self, is this healing me? Is this helping me? Is this good for me? Is this loving for me? Because for me personally, love feels good to me. That's what feels good to me. Encouragement feels good to me. That's what feels good to me. That's what I do with my children. I tell them how amazing they are, how beautiful they are, how wonderful they are, how brilliant they are, how perfect they are. And every expression, because every expression is perfect, every expression is beautiful, every expression is amazing. I would never dream of imposing my values onto one of these beautiful beings who have come into my life as such a great blessing. So, obviously I do try to instill values in them, and we have rules. Try to keep violence out of their life as much as possible until they're teens, and try to keep them on a vegan diet and other things that I have them do. But ultimately, it's to bring them to a state of peace, love, joy, truth, and divinity. And I just want to find them to find their own truth, their own love. Find what they came into this world to be. So is the person that's working with you doing that with you? Allowing that for you? Allowing you to come into your own state of divinity? Allowing you to find what you came here to do, truly what you came here to do? What you came here to do. No one can determine that for you. That's yours. So, I'm done with egoic exchange. I'm done with people needing to demean me and calling it helping me with grace, because I know it's not the truth. I know that within me is the truth, within me is the peace, within me is the love, and in me is the divine understanding. And God gives me everything that I need from that place. So I exchange with people who are loving and kind, devoted to the divine. I'm not exchanging with people who are demeaning, unkind, trying to put their gestures of what they believe are truth upon me, because it's not truth for me. I encourage you to do the same. I love you. Thank you. Makorona sirata karamasiva kroma arende kaliatan zirata kruto ro 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 ram nam dom dom dim dim da kramasira. We don't need to exchange in anything but love. We don't need to exchange in anything but kindness. We don't need to exchange in anything but divine understanding and grace. That's where it is now. That's what we're doing now. Seeing each other in grace, seeing each other in truth, seeing each other in peace, seeing each other in love, with love, for love. I read a great quote by Yogananda this week. There you can hear my daughter in the background expressing herself. Yogananda said something about loving kindness is the most important thing. And that's what will allow the Kundalini to rise up the spine. Loving kindness. Found that very interesting. So we're expressing on that theme. Thank you. I love you. Always in divinity, always in truth, always in kindness, always in love. Kurumasa Sansiara Kurushava, Handare Te Shava Kuruno Hrondo, Mati, Haraka Om Mata.
Love is all you ever need.